My guest today brings a rare combination of experience. She's an attorney who's negotiated thousands of settlements and a coach who helps people lead and live with greater calm, clarity, and power. What drew me to this conversation is so many women are taught they have to harden themselves to be taken seriously, especially in negotiations, leadership, and boundary setting. Welcome to Deals with Heels. I'm Debra, your host. Today, we're talking about what it looks like to negotiate and lead from presence instead of pressure, and to hold strong boundaries without guilt, and access real power without disconnecting ourselves from the process. If you've ever felt torn between being strong and being human, then this conversation is for you. Welcome, Arlene, to Deals with Heels.
Thanks for having me. That's a cool introduction. You actually read it and pulled it all together. Thank you.
I'm not good enough to not read it. And the teleprompter, I think I would need a much bigger monitor to have teleprompter and be.
Yeah,
So I like to have my backup just in case. I'm
nice,
so
nice.
grateful to have you on the show. You have such a strong background in leadership, and being an attorney gives you a vast level of knowledge that most entrepreneurs don't have. And I'm sure it makes you a great coach too.
People always ask me how I switched from one to the other, but it was like this gradual process, as an attorney where I got that diploma in coaching and mentoring. I got that diploma in transformational holistic counseling and that certification in meditation because I had three amazing women in my life. I have more than that who actually got certified or went to school for however long and then formed their own schools and then offered it to the public. With the coaching, Belinda Bailey, who started the Global Coaching Academy, it's in Perth, Australia.
Mm.
I have like family and friends there. And she kept on saying for about 3 years, Arlene, you should really do this. And I was like, you know what I'm doing when it comes to negotiating and communicating. And I was so wrong. There is something really beautiful about learning how to actively listen to people and to bring that to family and business relationships and everything. It does change. It changes a lot.
I definitely want to talk about that. What did negotiating thousands of settlements teach you about power versus presence?
Well, as an attorney, I wasn't always in the seat of power, because basically the first 12 years of my practice, I was a family law practitioner. So I represented people in divorce, dissolution, child custody, and I got appointed by the court to represent the kids in divorce cases. And I came from a nice middle class family in Louisville, Kentucky, didn't know what I'd gotten myself into. And it was this, and you talk about walls and blockages that women put up, and the women who were practicing that kind of law that were like 10 or 15 years ahead of me, they just had all sorts of walls around them. And I'm like, I'm not enjoying myself anymore. And I don't want to become like them. So I became a commercial law attorney. I had an into that. And basically, I helped businesses collect their debts. So it was business to business. And so oftentimes I was on the phone with a business owner who was having trouble paying their bills. Very rarely. I mean, sometimes if we did, when we filed something, we got a judgment, we started collecting on it. Attorneys would get involved, but more often than not, I enjoyed mostly being in the position of power. And so
With
I
some
felt that that
people
was,
that were in a really emotional state. I
oh
mean,
my God,
divorces,
yes,
even if you're the person choosing to be divorced, it's emotional. It's a
it
big
is.
loss of a relationship. And then moving
Yes,
into people that are struggling financially also, there's big emotions involved in
right.
that.
Not quite as heavy as the divorce stuff because lots of times there were kids involved. In the divorce stuff, I was not necessarily in a position of power. There was usually an attorney on the other side.
But you did
Yeah,
have to have a presence to be able to stand in that and negotiate as well.
I was young when I started practicing law, and I was 29 when I opened my own law firm and I was doing it. And it was hard because there were a lot more men in it, and it was a lot more caustic and a lot more kind of verbal abuse was allowed by the court and the judges than that is probably allowed now. And so I learned from the School of Hard Knocks. Was not easy.
And, I was talking to a colleague last week actually about working environments in the 90s. And I graduated from college in 89 and went right into corporate world. And it was nothing for people to throw things in a meeting. I mean,
Really?
yes, it was crazy. I'm like, 24 looking like, holy shit. And just trying to be small so that somebody can throw something at me. It was a weird time before HR really started building in a lot of, well, in all of the companies, and a lot of the standards I think hadn't been built. So I get that. Boy, it was just, there were the times then that I didn't want to stand out. That's for sure, because I didn't know how to hold myself and handle that.
Yeah.
And I think that's true. Why do you think women believe they need to harden themselves to be taken seriously?
I don't know if they still feel that way as much as they did in past moments. I'm a member of the Colorado Women's Bar Association. I'm the only grandmother. And I just wanted to give back because, I started my own law firm when I was 29, found out I was pregnant a month later. And my ex-husband was doing his residency at the Cleveland Clinic. We had moved 6 hours away from home in Kentucky, so I didn't have anyone to support me. And I find that a lot of women today, they have children, they have elderly parents, some have a partner, some don't, but both people need to work and it's stressful. And a lot of them that I meet, maybe the younger ones that are just still in their 20s or early 30s, they still haven't learned how to stand up for themselves as well. But you have to learn pretty quickly, or
And I
you're just going to be mowed over. And I feel like a lot of women are helping other women now. There's the Colorado Women's Bar has continuing legal education stuff and like group meetings and stuff like that where we support each other. And I just find it's different.
I think that in that environment, it definitely could be, because those are women that have been through law school, which isn't easy to get through. And you have to really fight for yourself and learn how to advocate for others. But I see all the time women that it comes across not as being hard, it comes across as defensive, combative. I think they fall into a victim role rather than standing strong and feeling comfortable with their femininity. Do you find that
Right.
in the clients that aren't attorneys?
I find that it runs through our genetics because I can feel that within myself. And I really have to watch it. It's like I can feel like someone does something that my gut reaction is to be defensive and to lash back out. And I really have to breathe and go, it's not about them, it's about me, and I have the ability to respond and not react, especially if I'm grounded and fully present and not making anything they say about me because other people's opinions are none of my business. And the way people treat me or speak to me says so much more about them than it does about me. So I feel that it's genetically within women and maybe men too. I don't know, but we are different. And so it's there, but we have the ability to acknowledge that it's there and not allow it to control us.
I agree with that. And I think it's different for men because it's okay for them to be defensive. Their conditioning in society thinks, oh, well, he's a man. He's telling us how he feels and defending himself. And that's what men do. They're warrior. They defend each other. But when women do it, we are bitchy and complaining. And I think there's a little bit of a dichotomy between that too. I want to talk about what it feels like true executive power. When you're really in it and you feel it and you've lost all of that defensiveness, how does that really feel internally? I think some
I
of us
call it,
are,
I think it's like executive presence, not necessarily executive power. It's the presence that I'm holding. I'm holding it for myself and I'm holding it for others. And to me, it's like holding a really strong, judgment free, unconditionally loving space. Full stop. I don't have to buy into stereotypes about men or women. I can just talk to someone as they are because as an attorney and as a collection attorney, I dealt with mostly men. There were women in
hmm
there, but a lot of people from the collection agencies that we went to business meetings with and the law firms that we went to business meetings with, most of the attorneys were men. There were some women. And I have two brothers, no sisters. I had to learn how to adjust and adapt. And I think, for me, it's like it's a feeling thing that I've learned how to do. It's like I feel like there's roots of light going into the core of the planet, and I'm a tree and I'm really grounded. And I feel like the planet pulling me in and I'm really present. And when you sort of feel and visualize that, if someone tries to push you over, even someone that's 5'1" and like a little lightweight, you can't do it because you're just really solidly there. And, another thing we can do to get in that executive presence is just to drop judgment. It's like, wow, that's good luck. I'm judging myself again. I'm doing that to myself. It's sometimes affirmations, sometimes, focusing on what we're moving towards. We were talking about technical stuff beforehand. So if I need to get help, I will, but I'm not going to be focusing on how pissed off I am that this thing is not working. I'm going to be focusing on, gee, it's great to be in this conversation. And so that helps to change, our mindset is everything. And we can bring some breath work into it because often if we're defensive, we're really, really stressed. So, if we breathe in through our nose, out through our nose, out breath longer than the in breath, it takes us out of fight or flight into rest and relax. And so those are a few of the things we can do. And also, one of the best ways to get rid of stress so we're not defensive is to be fully prepared. If we're going to be in a meeting, prepare for it. If you need to talk to a mentor, talk to them. Do the best you can to be prepared, and you're going to feel a lot more confident as well. It's not all, yes, I'm just going to embody executive presence and not know what the heck I'm talking about.
And I think that feels sometimes uncomfortable when you first start doing it. And so our brain wants to take us back to comfort always. So when we feel uncomfortable those first few times, it's important to stand there and do it, right? To hold on to that. Even though it's uncomfortable this time, don't let it trigger you towards dropping into their way of doing it. And that
Yeah, and
defensiveness. I mean,
yeah,
I've had people I was talking about in my last episode was my 100th episode and the things that felt really heavy and the negative comments would get to me at first. I've had people ask me what's wrong with my face and all kinds of craziness that you would be like. And so I had a gentleman who started his podcast around the same time I did mine. And it was early on when I was getting a little bit of those kinds of comments that were negative. And he messaged me and said, I'm so jealous. You already have trolls. And it made me feel so much better. Right? Like, oh, I didn't think of it from that perspective, that just having that attention is part of being in there and being able to hold that boundary and not react to it and move on.
right.
And my own positive voice has been really helpful. Why do you think women in particular struggle with setting boundaries?
You always talk about women in particular. I don't know if I agree with you. I think that men and women set boundaries sometimes in different ways. There is a lot of it still runs genetically with the way we were taught. Boys and girls were raised very differently by my mom and dad, who were wonderful people, but that's what they learned from their parents. And different things were expected of me. I didn't quite agree with all of that, but they had adapted and adjusted. So I think the way I feel about it is that there's masculine and feminine ways to set boundaries. And my ideal that I visualize all the time is that men and women are walking hand in hand as equals, and we're adapting and adjusting. We're using the masculine kind of boundaries when those are appropriate, and the feminine kind of boundaries when they are. And I'm not talking about the negative way, So
Like, what does
I
that
get
look like in real life? And I always gauge it with women because we're a female empowerment podcast.
right,
So I
right.
am always going to come back to the female point of view and to gauge it towards that. It's not that I think men are great at setting boundaries because I don't think that. We are gauged towards in
Okay,
this
sorry.
audience. Our
Right.
conversation
Thanks for the
is
readjustment. I get it.
yes, is about
Right.
women. And I think those societal conditioning systemically make it difficult for us to set boundaries because we're taught to be nice and to make everything okay. And we have a different way that we respond. And so traditional ways sometimes of setting boundaries come across as mean when they come from us. I always want to honor my femininity
Right.
and be able to set a boundary and it be my boundary, a feminine boundary, and be just as strong as a masculine boundary. without having to label it as that. So I don't have to think of myself as being masculine by setting this type of a boundary. I want to
Hmm.
be myself, and I'm feminine and I'm strong. And this is how I set that boundary. And I think that's incredibly difficult for most women in my experience.
Well, I guess what we have to do is just acknowledge, I feel like I'm being selfish or whatever the story is we're telling ourselves. And that's where I love Brene Brown. I don't know if you've ever
Hmm.
heard her talk about the story I'm telling myself is, and she uses it in business meetings. The story I'm telling myself is, I was on the itinerary for today. I'm giving an example, and you're not even talking about it, and by doing that, then we can say, well, you really deserve like a whole hour of discussion here. We don't have time, and I'm scheduling you to go first in the next meeting. Or it could be to our partner. The story I'm telling myself is, and maybe it's true and maybe it's not. We can play that game with ourselves and say, I'm acknowledging that I feel selfish and I want to play small and I can feel it in all these feminine ways of dealing with boundaries. And I don't have to validate it. I can be who I am authentically and still have strong boundaries. And sometimes it takes people a while. It's like my son is all grown up. I love him dearly, but he knows when I say absolutely not, I'm not going to do that. Because sometimes he wants me to do stuff. I'm like, you're a grown up man. You can handle this. I'm not doing that for you anymore.
Those parental boundaries, right?
Yeah. And
I love it
yes,
when they turn 18 and they come and want your help to set a medical appointment or to call. And, I'm not allowed to do that unless you actually give me permission in writing with the doctor now. So you're going to have to make that call yourself. And it's easy when it comes to that, but setting those boundaries and respecting your own time as a parent is really important, and it
right,
helps them grow.
right.
I find difficulty sometimes in setting boundaries. I think it's codependency in business. I let go of people pleasing in my personal life, and it took a while. It took a lot of work to get there, and I still feel myself that inner pull of doing it in business. And an example is, let's say I get a call and somebody wants to meet with me, and I have Friday open, but that is reserved for client work and admin. And I would schedule over that because that's just Deborah time. I can do that in the evenings or I can do that on the weekends. And I would do it automatically, thinking it was a combination of wanting to please them and get the appointment in and be accommodating, and of fear of loss of future, right? Like if I don't do it right now, then I'm going to lose an opportunity.
Right.
And figuring all of that out, and it's easily solved with just asking them, is this urgent? Do I need to try to work you in? And if not, then I have time next week or in 2 weeks or whenever that
Right.
is. But I was people pleasing from the beginning by default. And I had to condition myself away from making those assumptions that they'll tell me if they need it to be sooner. I don't have to cram it all in and sacrifice my own time. And those types of boundaries where I was just conditioned to do it from my personal life bled over, and it didn't automatically fix the business bleed side when I fixed it personally.
What you raise is really important for your audience. Is that all we have to do is have awareness, and you're bringing it to awareness to your audience that I used to do this, and this was not about having clear, strong, and appropriate boundaries because I was assuming that it was going to be urgent or someone else was more important than the work that I set aside for myself. That was my boundary, and those are important boundaries for a business person, a businesswoman to have. And so, what you're sharing this is, if the people in the audience that are still doing that, they can go, oh, I can stand on Deborah's shoulders and I can do that as well. And so what we can do is we can really decide to, okay, I'm going to observe myself. I'm my best friend, and I'm going to notice at the end of the day, or maybe in the middle of the day, sometime where I feel like maybe I've let myself down with the boundaries that I created. No one else did it to me. I was the one that made that choice, or where maybe someone pushed me and I allowed them to do so. And I just find also with boundaries, which I was exemplifying before, is that they don't have to make any excuses. I hear that you want to come in on Friday, but I'm sorry, I'm already booked. I have these other times that are close to that. Does anything there work for you? Because if we say no, there's nothing anyone can do. If we're sort of hesitating, then there is. And so it's really up to us to go, hey, this is my time for me. I'm going to stand on Deborah's shoulders. There's a lot of other women that do that as well. I'm to see how it feels. And what I have found is that, I'm sure you have too, the more I come from my heart and say, this is a time that I set aside for this, and this is really important for my business or for my personal life or for my friends, whatever it is, I'm not going to violate that unless it's some sort of emergency. And you can ask like you do.
I mean, that's all it would take is for me to
Right.
ask the question
Right.
and then try to solve and find a
And
way
you
to
do
yes.
that
But
now.
I was doing it just doing it without any kind of thought as to why I was taking away the time. I didn't even realize from a self-care perspective how it was harming me until I
Right.
was worn out and tired from working, and it took a friend to say, "Well, you don't have to do that. You need to honor
Right.
that time," and finding my way through that. What do you think about I mean, I think it kind of is coming from more of a place of fear. So like fear-based boundaries versus setting a boundary from a place of your own strength and power. I think
And love.
oftentimes we get confused with what that
Right.
is. Can you talk about
Yeah.
that a little bit?
Well, I believe you need to bring love into the mix because we have to fill our own cup up with love. If this is a cup here, it needs to be filled up with love, and the overflow is what we share with other people. So there might be power, there might be strength, but we have to be loving ourselves, or our well is going to run dry. We're going to be giving and giving and giving. Then we'll get angry and frustrated to get that, and someone will beat ourselves
Amen.
up for it, and
And
then
I
we
can
start
go
all over again.
And I can go deep in my reserve tank and not realize I'm in it. So I really have to
Right,
watch myself and hold
right,
to that and not
right.
like when I was automatically scheduling it because I didn't want to miss opportunities, that's kind of a fear-based way to do it. But I think also people will set a boundary thinking they're being strong and they're really afraid.
And there's a lot of fear in today's world. And also, instead of beating ourselves up for that in terms of boundaries, it's like, wow, I've always done that. But that's really not a kind thing to do with myself, and it's depleting my cup of love. And then I have to work really hard to fill it back up again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start standing on other women's shoulders and seeing how that feels and playing with that. All we can do, practice makes permanent. And we don't have to stand alone and start from scratch. There's plenty of other women who have gone before us, and maybe I'm more on the edge of that. But there's a couple, 2 or 3 generations before me that were already bringing that to the fore, and it's it's okay. It's just absolutely okay. We need to stop beating ourselves up for self-love and self-care. Full stop.
I agree. I have worked hard to get out of that, and you're talking about being a grandmother earlier. I'm a grandmother also. I'm older than I look, and I think that a lot of our generation in particular have our female role models that we grew up around that fit a different model than we fit, and that fits as it goes through different generations, and honoring that and holding that is really important. Even though we maybe didn't have that model, we had to figure it out for ourselves and from peer and people that learned it before us. I love being able to stand on other women's shoulders. I hadn't thought of it in that respect before, and I think
Right.
that's a great way to put it because we can all do that for each other, right? Come
Right.
stand on my shoulders, lean on me for a little while until you get your legs under you.
Right. And also we stood on I stood on I'm a little bit older than you. We stood on the generation of women that maybe they were caustic, maybe they were really tough because there weren't means for attorneys. There was a third of my class was an attorney. Or women, I'm sorry. And that wasn't the way it was for prior generations. And they were like, one in, 100 people in a class or whatever it was. So they adopted a different way of being so that they could make it, so they could be that in the world. And we can learn from that, take what works, like we did with our parents, and then sort of bring our own knowing, our own, from life and everything into that new thing. And we can also help support each other in that process.
My grandma used to say, she would say, go ahead, ingest all of that. Don't choke on the bones. Don't choke on the bones. And I love that now. I think about that, that there's value everywhere. You don't have to be all in. I think we're very conditioned by the media algorithm and all of the psyops that exist out in the world. I'm a marketing expert and I can't help but see it. And I think we're so conditioned by that that we feel like we can't ingest somebody else's opinions and somebody else's ideas because that somehow diminishes our brand and who we are. And being able to integrate it and take parts of it that apply to us and not choke on the rest and not throw it all away because then we miss out on the rest of it too.
Well,
On
there
the
is that
parts
other
that
saying from grandmothers, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, which
exactly.
really started when they used had this one big tub and the dad got to take the bath first and then the mom did, and all the kids, and by the time you got to the baby, it was really disgusting water. So the baby could get lost in it. So yeah, I think there's stories that we tell ourselves that you're sharing that it's like the buck stops here. I'm not going to buy into that story. I'm going to feel into what's good now. And part of my way of being is like, I wonder, I'm really curious about that. And I have to work at it. It's not all on board, but being genuinely curious, does this work here or not? Do I want to play with this or not? And we have that choice, and we can stop shooting ourselves about what we should or shouldn't do. And that's judgment, that's expectations, and it's just not helpful. And as we come together as women, we can help ourselves, choose a different way.
Amen to that. We are so hard on each other as women. Men don't have to be mean to us because we are hard on ourselves and each other in so many ways. A great example, my daughter is a doctor in her residency and she's 32 and she got pregnant right at the end of medical school. So she started her first year residency very pregnant. And of course, it's busy and everybody's, running. There are 8 or 10 people. And the men were the ones that were like, let's take the elevator. They were the ones that were kind and accommodating to her. The women were the ones that were judgmental. And I think that came from a place because she would call me and to talk to me about it. She didn't understand. She felt like women should be more empathetic, that they could see themselves. And I said, but when you're different and you're doing it differently than them, and they may have feelings about that, like maybe I should be having, maybe it's questions. And women are hard on other women. They were hard on her for that. And I was so astounded by that because I felt like the same as she did, that women should see it from a place of empathy, but they didn't. They were extra hard on her. And I think that is where maybe their cup of love isn't overflowing yet and they
And
need to
you know
fill it
what?
up.
You know what I do, and I feel like you're already modeling that as well, is that I recognize that. I recognize that it's in the female psyche and the female mind is if we're in a body, we're all connected to the male and the female mind.
Hmm.
So I've made a conscious choice and I used to be a runner and my body went after, well, no, I'm sorry, honey, you're not doing that anymore. So I am a member of a yoga school and there are some men that come, they're all welcome, but it's mostly women and it's not baby yoga, it's hard, but I make a point of connecting with other women and supporting them. And when we model that behavior, we help to ground something that's new. And yes, because it used to be that maybe that women fought over each other to get the best man because they were dependent economically on them. So if it's a different world, but it still is in the female psyche. And so what we can do is just model a different behavior. And then, if we're really excited about it, somewhere that sort of gets in the ethers, another woman will go, I'm going to try that new way. That feels a lot nicer. So that's been part of my mission is just not consciously. This is something that I have to do. I really enjoy talking to people. And before a yoga class or after, there's that connected time. And I really think we can make a difference from that space because what you're saying is true. It has historically been true, but it doesn't mean that it has to be true for future generations.
That is great insight. It really is. Where do you think that inner critic comes from in leadership. Like all of those women have that inner critic, and I think that's what's spilling over onto other people sometimes, right?
Where does it come from? The psyche of other women?
Well,
I
no,
don't know.
you're like your own inner critic.
Well, we're all connected. We're not an island, you know. We're energetically, genetically connected with all of humanity, and there's a lot of that criticism out there. So, you know, we can, if we're empathic or intuitive or we're sensitive, and obviously you are, we're going to take it on from other people without even knowing about it, and we probably took it on a little bit from our parents. You know, yeah, it's just there, and the way we diffuse it is just like, "I see you." You know how people go with their eyes, "I see you?" It's like, "I see
Mhm.
you. You cannot hide from me." And I'm choosing to do it differently. And we're like, "I'm in the driver's seat. We're buckling you up in the back. You know, how can I love and support myself now?" And it's like turning a big cruiser around, you know, one of those, you know, carnival ships or whatever. And we have to practice a new way of being. It's like, okay, I'm doing that inner thing, inner critic again. No, I'm choosing something different and not beat ourselves up. And then choosing that moment, if I was talking to a really dear friend of mine and I heard them saying that, how would I support, love, and nurture them, and then turn around and give it to ourselves? So we can acknowledge it's there, acknowledge it's within us, but we can do something about it to start making it smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yes, yes. Let's talk about maybe a moment that you had to unlearn how you were supposed to be, because you come from a generation where there were a lot of things that you were supposed to do, and you went, "No, I'm gonna be a lawyer," right? So you had to kind of
Yeah.
unlearn that dichotomy of, "This is what I'm supposed to be." Tell me about a real life moment where you felt that.
Oh my God. I was so angry. You know, I did it less than gracefully, full stop. I had very generous parents. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, but she helped my father with the financials and ran the house and everything. She wanted to do that. Her parents were very poor, and um, yeah, that was what her generation did if they could.
And it's
And
essential, right? It's
my God,
valuable and it's
yes,
essential.
absolutely, absolutely. Um, so except for like a teeny tiny little bit at the very end, my parents paid for Emory University and University of Kentucky College of Law. You know how much of a gift that is? I don't think I really appreciated it back then. So I got my license in Kentucky. Then I went up to Ohio with my ex, and I had to study again. Before that happened, right before I graduated from law school, my father sent me this beautiful letter. It was filled with so much love, and this was his generation. You know, he didn't know any different. That, you know, it was just his pleasure to put me through law school. But if I wanted to stay home and not practice law, that was okay. I
Wow.
sent him a
That's a
horrible
big
letter.
deal.
I sent him a horrible letter. It's like, oh my God, Dan, I am so sorry. Because I was like, I went through all this. There's no friggin' way I'm not going to practice law. Oh my God. But I think I learned from that. You know, that's not the way to treat anyone. And I think at the time when I graduated from law school, I was 25
Ooh.
or had only worked, you know, dabbed here and there because, you know, maybe just for fun. My parents were very supportive and I was a little bit sheltered to say the least. And, you know, hindsight's always 2020. So yeah, you know, I've really learned from that. You know, you really have to step back before you open your big mouth, Arlene, and really feel into what was the feeling behind this. And you know, I did apologize to my father, and I was very humble and gracious about it. You know, years later, but you know, it was like sometimes we just have to step back and really feel into where's that person coming from. It's a different generation completely.
Well, then, but the same thing applies to the here and now when you're having those kinds of difficult things happen, and being able to admit and change and lead in a different way is difficult for everyone. It is.
Right.
And it feels weird when you first start. It feels uncomfortable. And so moving forward, even though you're uncomfortable, is so important. And that's such a great example of you learning that, wow, dad was being so kind and generous and trying to give back options to me that maybe were part of his stereotypes, that he wasn't proud of you, but he wanted you to know it was okay
Yeah.
but still, I love that story. It's so great. And it reverberates through everything you've been doing in your life. We're getting close to running out of time. That's how great conversations are. I want to finish with talking about how we recover after having a difficult conversation. Because sometimes
Yeah.
you have a difficult conversation and sometimes you're fired up about it and proud of yourself, but often you're just like, oh, I wish I'd have said this or I could have done this. What are some ways to recover in a healthy way that prepares us for the next conversation?
Well, the first thing is to remember, and I'm not trying to be mean or hear anything, but most people are very, very self-centered. You can look at that back at a situation where you feel like you put your foot in your mouth and you embarrassed yourself, and you would go talk to the people that were there, and I would be willing to wager that they will not remember it unless it was really something that there was no way that anyone could not. Because people are just to themselves. And so that's the first thing we need to tell ourselves. And the second is that, any disaster can be turned into a blessing. We can make that happen. And it doesn't help. It just pulls us down into a deep, dark hole if we start beating ourselves up and we make it mean things and we create a lot of stories around it. The best way that we can do it is to go, wow, that was not a good look. How could I do that differently next time? And have feel better about myself and have a different result. And if we really feel and visualize that, or maybe we journal it, whatever works best for us, we're going to lay this really nice foundation for when something similar happens again, that it's there for us and we're not going to just repeat the same thing over and over again. And just a way to integrate some kindness into the process instead of having that whipped, bad girl. And why do we do that to ourselves? It's not helpful.
I think so too. And when you are just now embodying that new way of doing it and it feels awkward, you're hard on yourself about that too. And so saying it was awkward this time, but it'll be easier next time.
Right.
And I do a lot of self-talk. I think it's really important. It's important for me. Other people journal. I journal some, but that calling myself on my own stuff and encouraging myself has been a really big part of my personal growth and of my own kind of inner management, so to speak. And so you had some great
Yeah.
ideas for that. And I'm sure that our audience is going to really act on those tips and take them to heart. As we're closing out, tell us about your business and how, if the audience wants to learn more about you and what you do, how can they do that? And what specifically are you working on right now?
Well, I've just totally revamped my website. It's Jewel, Jewel, like the diamond, consultancy.com. Or you can just Google Arlene Cohen-Miller and I'll come up on all the social media places, not all of them. I'm not on TikTok.
And
And
we
my
will link to
website.
those in the show
Yeah,
notes.
thank
So
you.
don't worry.
Yeah.
We'll link to all of her stuff.
Yeah. And I guess for my women focus. Anyway, it's about turning the inner critic into the inner coach and how we can take care of ourselves better because I think it covers a lot of stuff, when we're working on that. And so I'm going to be doing that more in groups. I'm also a coach and a mentor and I do workshops and keynotes and stuff like that. I do a bunch of stuff with negotiating as well because I really think that when we negotiate from the heart with that executive presence and we stand strong in our leadership skills, and we can make a big difference as well. And so that's sort of what I'm expanding out into now. And I'm really excited about it. So thanks for asking me.
I love that inner coach. I hadn't thought of it in that perspective, but that's exactly what I'm doing when I'm doing all my self-talk. I'm my own coach, talking to myself and talking myself through the things and the plans that I put together with my coach or with my counselor or friends, and we talk about it, but really doing it in real life, helping yourself through that, talking yourself through it is so important. And I had never framed it that way as my own inner coach. So
Yes.
I appreciate that. And I'm so grateful for you coming onto the show. And we're at the end, everyone. And if this conversation resonated with you, if it challenged how you think about leadership, power, or growth, then my work lives on beyond this podcast in your growth. And through the Growth Vanguard, I work with founders and leaders who want to build businesses that are strong, sustainable, human-centered, and built to last. You can learn more about that work at thegrowthvanguard.com and decide if it's right for you. Until next time, stand strong in your power, especially when it gets uncomfortable. We're done. We made it.